All right. I greet you, lovers of freedom. This Biafra 101 TV. You guys will pay attention and watch the analysis of this white guy. I don't know. This white skin, I don't know the kind of morale this white skin is giving the white people that made them to believe that they are superior to black skin is what I don't understand. In this video, you will listen the analysis of this guy, how in America, how the whites in America believe that the black people, blacks, ought to be their slave. That naturally they are born to serve them and they are born to be slave to them. It's quite pathetic. That is why this America you are seeing today, they were built by blacks. They were built by blacks. And today, blacks are being treated like nobody in America. They are being treated like nobody in America. The guy analysis, when I was listening to it, I said, what? Just look at the mindset and mentality of people. Just look at the mindset. Just because of the color of the skin. If you remove the color of the skin, the blood inside, same. That is why black man can donate blood to white man. White man can donate blood to black man. The only difference is the color of the skin. And even the black is the only being, is only species that can reproduce itself. Meet white woman, give am belle, go born black for you. I want a certain. Any race, any race in the world, meet Chinese, meet Indians, meet any race, in fact, so long as you be black, so long as you have that black gene, give am belle, he go born black for you. But in their own case, it's not same. In their own case, it's not same. Black is domineering. They know all these things. That's why they are doing everything to silence blacks. They are just terrified about blacks. Also, you will see the role they used Christianity to play in enslaving blacks. When we keep talking about these things, some people will say we should forget about religion, but religion is part of. If you said we should forget about religion and you don't like colonialism, or you are against what the West is doing to Africa, or you are against the West, you don't want to tell yourself the gospel truth. You don't want to be honest to yourself. You don't want to be honest to yourself, because the Christianity they brought to us, the main purpose of bringing the Christianity is to condition the mind of a black man. That's the gospel truth. But when you talk about all these things, some people will say, hey, don't go that side, don't go, leave Christianity, leave this one, leave church, leave this. But the fact remains that the white that brought this Christianity, the primary purpose of bringing the Christianity is to use it to do what? To enslave blacks more and to condition their mind for them to believe that they are subject to what? To the white. That is why if you see Anglican communion, Anglican church, that wrapper the mothers are tying, that the thing there, that chain you see there is symbol of slave chain. And the founder of Anglican Church is the great grandfather of Queen Elizabeth, being King James. Yes, and he was a slave merchant during his old days. He bought slaves from Africa. That's the gospel truth. So when we are saying all these things, we are not saying it just because we don't believe in religion. Listen, before these guys brought this church, we have been communicating with our Creator. We've been communicating with our Chi. Not that if you don't go to that church, if you pray, God will not answer your prayers. God will answer your prayer. Anywhere you lie down, anywhere you stay and pray to God, God will answer you. That's the honest truth. I don't want to talk much on this matter before people will now start writing in the comment section, leave religion, leave Christianity. The truth, if you want to liberate yourself from the West, you have to liberate yourself from everything that West brought to us to condition our mind, not to think rational. They will tell you that if your wealth is in heaven, that if you are blessed are those who are poor here, that they will be rich in heaven, that there is a place called heaven you will go. Giving you hope there is another place. Meanwhile, they are milking your resources, giving you hope somewhere. Why didn't them hope on that place? Why are they collecting your resources, using it to develop themselves? They would have waited for their own mansion in heaven. If there is a place called mansion, they would have do what? Be expecting their own treasures and all these things in that mansion. Is it only blacks that will be expecting mansion, or they will be promising mansion in heaven? And our son CJ that mansion. No long talk. I want you guys to watch this video. I greet you all. Peace and love. Please like, subscribe, and share. We move.
When studying American history, one of the most important questions to answer is, how did Americans justify slavery? How did they convince themselves that they had the right to own black people as property? What we find is that they had numerous ways to justify slavery, including philosophy, religion, science, and straight-up lies and self-deception. One prominent way that slave owners justified slavery was by turning to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, who is without a doubt one of the most famous philosophers in human history. American education in the 18th and 19th centuries had a heavy focus on ancient Greece and Rome, and Aristotle's philosophy was studied by many Americans, including the Founding Fathers. Even though Aristotle was extremely intelligent and a very influential thinker, he left the world a dark legacy when it came to his views on slavery. Aristotle believed that slavery was normal and natural, and that some men were born to be masters and others were born to be slaves. He argued that humanity is divided into two, the masters and the slaves, or those who have the right to command and those who are born to obey. Therefore, to justify slavery, all American slave owners had to do was point to Aristotle. They argued that white men were the natural-born masters and black people were the natural-born slaves. However, an even greater justification for slavery than Aristotle was Christianity. Slave owners frequently justified the right to own black people as property by citing the Bible and arguing that slavery was sanctioned by God. As Samuel F.B. Morse put it, slavery per se is not a sin. It is a social construction ordained from the beginning of the world for the wisest purposes, benevolent and disciplinary, by divine wisdom. There are plenty of passages from both the Old and New Testament that condone slavery. For example, Exodus provides detailed rules about owning slaves and tells slave owners that the slave is their property. In the New Testament, Paul says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to gain their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord." Slave owners would often read the Bible out loud to their slaves to show them that God approved of their enslavement. For example, when Solomon Northup was enslaved in Louisiana, his master would preach pro-slavery sermons on Sundays. His favorite part of the Bible was Luke chapter 12, verse 47, which states, "The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready, or does not do what the master wants, will be beaten with many blows." Solomon Northup described how after reading this line, his master would explain, "That inward that don't take care, that don't obey his Lord, that's his master. That there inward shall be beaten with many stripes." Now many signifies a great many. 40, 100, 150, that's scripture. One of the most popular ways that slave owners used the Bible to justify slavery was through the curse of Ham. Most of you are probably familiar with the story of Noah. In Genesis, we learn that God told Noah he was going to destroy the world in a great flood, and he instructed Noah to build an ark and fill it with 2 of every animal so he could repopulate the world after the flood was over. In the story, Noah obeyed God, and after the flood, he became a drunk. I mean, you can't really blame him. He did just watch God annihilate nearly every living being on earth. In Genesis, we hear of a strange story that involves one of Noah's drinking binges. One day, Noah gets drunk and passes out naked. His son Ham sees him and tells his 2 brothers, who cover up their father with a blanket. When Noah wakes up and realizes that his son saw him naked and dishonored him, he curses Ham's son Canaan and says, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be." Some Americans interpreted this passage from the Bible to mean that all of Ham's descendants were forever doomed to be slaves. And they argued that black skin was the mark of the curse of Ham. Therefore, when Americans sought to justify slavery, all they had to do was say it wasn't their fault. It was Noah who cursed them to be slaves, and since this came from the Bible, it was seen as the word of God. This story might seem ridiculous, but many slave owners used this argument to rationalize their right to own black people. It didn't matter that this story was irrational and absurd. The point is that they were able to use Christianity as an excuse to abuse and exploit black people. Slave owners also justified slavery through the scientific theories of the time, which were heavily influenced by racism and white supremacy. For example, the French scientist Georges Cuvier argued that there were 3 distinct races of human beings: the white Caucasian, the yellow Mongolian, and the black Ethiopian. He said the Caucasian is distinguished by the beauty of the oval formed by his head and the color of his hair. To this variety, the most highly civilized nations, and those which have generally held all others in subjection, are indebted for their origin. On the other hand, he argued, the Negro has always remained in the most complete state of utter barbarism. For scientists like this, the fact that white people enslaved black people was simply a law of nature. For men like this, slavery was the natural state of the black race. Others, like the French naturalist Georges-Louis Buffon, believed that whites were helping black people by enslaving them. He believed that if black people were introduced to the cooler climate of the Americas, their skin would naturally turn white. He argued that in Europe, we behold the human form in its greatest perfection, and this is where we ought to form our ideas of the real and natural color of man. He said that if black people lived long enough in a cold climate, then their skin would become as white as the natives of Europe. Therefore, he believed that slavery was good for black people because it would eventually turn them white, which was the natural and perfect state of humanity. Never mind that human beings originated in Africa. Even abolitionists who opposed slavery still held racist ideas about black people. For example, the Philadelphia doctor Benjamin Rush believed that black skin was a disease that could be cured, and through the right treatment, black people could eventually become white. Another way that Americans justified slavery is arguing that by enslaving black people, they were doing them a favor. They argued that slavery was a moral good and benefited the slave. The man most responsible for this theory was George Fitzhugh from Virginia. In 1854, he published a book called Sociology for the South, where he argued that black people were inferior to whites and had to be slaves for their own good. Fitzhugh disagreed with the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Instead, he argued, men are not born physically, morally, or intellectually equal. It would be far nearer to the truth to say that some were born with saddles on their backs and others booted and spurred to ride them, and the riding does them good. For Fitzhugh, black people were born to be slaves. He argued, the Negro is but a grown child and must be governed as a child. The master occupies toward him the place of parent or guardian. Fitzhugh believed that a free black person was an oxymoron and said he would become an insufferable burden to society. Society has the right to prevent this and can only do so by subjecting him to domestic slavery. Fitzhugh argued that the Negro race is inferior to the white race, and if black people were ever to live in freedom next to whites, then gradual but certain extermination would be their fate. Therefore, Fitzhugh believed that by enslaving black people, whites were helping them. He said that slavery Christianizes, protects, supports, and civilizes him. He told his readers that the Negro slaves of the South are the happiest and, in some sense, the freest people in the world. Clearly, Americans had no deficit of justifications for why they had the right to own black people as slaves. However, all of these justifications were meant to do one thing: hide the fact that the real reason why white people enslaved black people is because of greed, profit, and power. Slavery was an economic system that produced extreme wealth, and white supremacy was the ideological justification that upheld it. The reason why white people came up with so many justifications for slavery is because in their heart they knew that it was wrong. They knew that they had no right to exploit and brutalize black people, so they constantly had to reassure themselves and ease their conscience. They had to constantly defend and justify a system that was clearly evil. They had to find some way to sleep at night.